Henderson was an RN school, 3 years of training. And the cost of 3 years of nursing school in 1947 was $300 for the 3 years.
The nurses' home was right next to the Parkland, and it was nice and convenient. There were about 40 of us on one floor, and there were two people to a bedroom. And we had a nurse, house mother, that we had to check in and check out when we left.
Our uniforms had a white collar, white cuffs, and it was blue and white stripe with a little belt, cotton belt on it. And of course we wore the white stockings and shoes. Then our second year, before we went in our second year, we had a capping ceremony where we got the caps. And we had took the white collar off, and we put on bib and an apron. And the hospital kept those clean for us and starched them and delivered them back, also the cap. Our third year, that was the reason for the black cap. And as you can see, it just folds back, and it's got a little button in the back.
We just did mostly classwork the first year, but then we started in the hospital. And we worked on the different floors. The lower floor was a medicine floor, and the floors were cement. And when they washed when the people that cleaned washed the floors, they just looked just as bad when they got through as when they started.
We lived in the basement for 6 months during our preclinical period. And after that, if we did not pass all of our grades or anything, we were washed out. I lived in a small room in the northwest corner of the basement, and I had 6 roommates. 3 of them washed out at the end of 6 months. 4 of us stayed, and of that 4, 3 graduated in 1948.
We didn't have air conditioning, and so the windows were open in the summertime because it was so hot. We just nearly died with those uniforms and the masks and the hats.
It was very intense, our work and studies. But I think we had so much more experiences working in the hospital than maybe later nurses had. We had very, very good training, very good training, very good instructors.
In those days, we washed every tube that went in and out of the body, and we had to wash all the needles and syringes and deburr the needles, and we had no experience in that.
The laundry would come up and they'd pile it on an old gurney, and we'd sit there if we weren't scrubbed or circulating in the operating room and fold up the hats and the masks and put them, because they had to be just so, and we put them in the box so the doctors could grab them, nurses, when they went into the operating room.
In leaving the nurses' home to go to the hospital to work or return in, if we were there at the door to leave, we had to stand and hold the door open if an upperclassman was coming up the walk. And we stood and held the door open until they passed through. Then we could leave and close the door. If we met them on the walkway coming or going, we always had to greet them with, "Good morning, Miss So-and-so," or "Good afternoon, Miss So-and-so." Everybody was known by their last name. No one was known by first names.
We had to go to the anatomy lab where the medical students were working on cadavers. And this was probably the second month that I was here. And to walk into that room and smell that odor and see all of those bodies, I thought, what am I doing? here. So that took a while to get over that. But then, you know, once you get beyond that, then it's fine.
Our first year, we had a curfew. We didn't have a key. Our junior and senior years, we had keys to the front door of the nurses' quarters, but we still had a curfew. If you didn't make that curfew, you had to go to the emergency room, and the night watchman would bring you over, and then you got called in if you were late getting in. That's what they tell me. That's what.
We did everything, as students, we did everything that was to be done. They didn't have very many nurses at that time, maybe one per unit, and even not that many in the evening time. But we had to work in Central Supply, and that was one of my favorite places. I didn't like the job, but it gave us an opportunity to flirt with the medical students.
In the nursing home, on our floor, there were probably, I'm thinking about 30 of us in the two-to a bedroom, but there was only one telephone, and for all of us.
All of us in the class were as close as sisters because we were all very young, such awesome new experiences that we shared together. Nobody else can share that with you unless you've been through it. And it was like anatomy lab. That was interesting.
As a student, we pretty much had to take care of, do all the baths and beds and all those kinds of things. And but on the private floor, we had young people. And we had a couple of police officers that had had motorcycle accidents, and they were in for the long term. And so that was fun. You know, most of our patients were not fun because they were elderly. And
The roof of the nurses' home had an area about 4 foot tall around it, and the girls went up there on their days off and time off when they could and took sun baths a la nude. Well, that was stopped because one day the director of nurses got on the bus in front of the nursing home with some of the nurses, and we were surprised to find there were several airmen that were stationed at Love Field that got out pictures and started looking at them and comparing them to the nurses getting on the buses to see if they could spot anybody whose picture they had taken on a flyby.
I hadn't heard anything about that. It may or may not be true. I don't recall seeing airplanes. Oh, that's funny.
it was a place where I think I learned about what it meant to be a human being. And I would hope that that would be part of its heritage. I learned what segregation was all about. I learned what life and death was all about. I came from being a naive, uneducated 17-year-old to going out to the cadaver lab every Wednesday afternoon and observing cadavers. I mean, you know, that was a shock to actually, you know, suddenly see all of these corpses. And I mean, you know, I think I just grew up very fast here because of the what was going on, you know, with people who were human beings.
When I was in nursing school at Parkland Hospital and a doctor walked into the room, the nurse stood up. And when I've done that since, even now, when a doctor walks into my room and I stand up, if I know him and know he's a physician, they ask me, "Why do you stand up?" And I said, "Because I'm a Parkland nurse, and we were taught to stand up when the doctor came into the room." And I haven't been able to get away from that yet. It's just something about what you've learned at Parkland that's still with you today.